Yes, ladies and gentlemen, episode 8, M2MMA Podcast. Chris is over there in South Africa. I'm in Kuala Lumpur. It's Sunday today. You might see this on Monday or whenever you do see it. Let's have a look back at UFC 323 to start off with. Some big changes. Farewell to Henry Cejudo, one of the best to ever do it in the weight class. Maximum respect to a multi-talented martial artist, Olympic gold medalist. Cringe though he may be, big up Triple C. He says goodbye to the sport of MMA. I must just say, I can't help but find it a bit of a shame that he lost years of his prime because he got a girlfriend. But we'll leave that aside and just say maximum respect to Henry Cejudo. And you, Josh Van, Myanmar stand-up, the first ever Burmese-born champion in the UFC, albeit in unfortunate circumstances for Pantoja. But all the haters, just sit down. Josh Van earned his title shot the hard way by knocking people out. You feel very sorry for Pantoja. But Josh Van is the man right now, and it's refreshed the entire division. Tatsuro Taira, I'm very happy, thank you. He's going to be the next challenger. So big news for the Asian MMA scene. And of course, Petr Yan gets the title back after losing it. I think he went on a losing run of about 3 fights, didn't he? And then what a glorious comeback to beat the machine, one of the best to ever do it. A champion made in Tiger Muay Thai, a friend of M2MMA over in Phuket, Thailand. So big news for Asian MMA.
Yeah, quite the sum up there, Andrew, and what a weekend it was. I think, firstly, you and I certainly had it extremely wrong in regards to Murab. We thought he would dominate that fight, and what a performance from Yan. I mean, I think he shocked everyone to some extent. I mean, in some respects, he out-wrestled Murab, which I think no one saw coming. What an impressive performance. And, I was ready to come on here today, talk about Murab, let's say, working his way to, again, potentially the GOAT in that division. But here we are talking about Petr Yan, and not often we see an athlete come back to this extent as well. Like I said, I think I've spoken previously beforehand that, in these sports, guys will go on a run, then someone might get their number, and they find it very hard to come back again. That's why it makes it even more impressive for me what Petr Yan's done. And so big shout out to him. And again, as you mentioned, a team at Tiger Muay Thai. Obviously, we'll talk about one championship a little bit later. It was a rough weekend for them in that front, but what a performance. And obviously, as you mentioned there, Joshua Van. I mean, yeah, look, no one likes to see a fight ended in that way, but it is part of the sport. Whether or not it takes the shine off his victory, I'm sure right now he doesn't feel it that way. There's no doubt we'll see a rematch, I would imagine. Certainly before we see, as you mentioned there, the next matchup potentially with Moreno losing. But yeah, I think it's a weekend of shocks. What more can we say? I think you got it right on the Van front, but I certainly got it wrong on both sides. So yeah, not my greatest weekend for predictions.
You feel for Pantoja an awful lot because you can imagine the preparation that's gone into this, what it took to get him there in the first place. He used to drive an Uber Eats, didn't he, or something similar. He's 35 years old now. So you imagine the sort of rehab that's going to be involved in that. We're looking at late 2026 probably for him to come back. Is he going to get an immediate title shot? Maybe not. Who's going to be holding the belt then? Who knows? But if there's one thing's for certain, the adversity that Pantoja's been through in his life and the ability that he showed in the octagon, you would back him to get that title back within the next 18 months. And it will be another crazy story, another twist in the tale of this wild sport that we love.
Yeah, I think the frustration is that, again, like it's such a quick ending, wasn't it? We never even got to see how that fight looked like it was going to play out. We have no, let's say, data or information to see what could have happened there. So, and you rightly mentioned it could be a while out for Pantoja, and that's a very fair point in terms of an immediate rematch. I think he will come back because he's that kind of character. Whether or not he'll ever be the same, unfortunately, as we know, guys who suffer severe injuries, in the nature of this sport, it is very hard to come back from. And at his age as well, could this be the end of Pantoja? It'd be a very sad ending if so. But as you mentioned, given his career and the storyline behind it, maybe this is just another amazing chapter to that story?
I just love the fact that it's turned the division on its head. If we're looking at the silver lining, I think Josh Van's so much fun. 24 years old. What is he, the fourth youngest UFC champion of all time? He's really fun to watch. I have to say Pantoja Van is a fight that I want to see, and I want to see it properly. And I'm sure most fans would share that sentiment. We do have to run it back. We do have to find out who's the better man, really. But we've seen instances like this in MMA before. All you can do is take care of your side of business. Josh Van did that. He showed up on weight. He showed up fit. And we've seen it happen before. We've seen, even with the Anderson Silva thing, right? Checking a kit, Is that a false victory somehow? That's slightly different, right? But it still feels a bit like not the way you would have envisioned winning. But Joshua Van did everything that he's needed to do for his whole career up until this point. Just because the other side suffered misfortune, can you really blame Josh Van for that? I don't think you can.
No, not at all. And I think, one of the questions I would ask, given the nature of the injury, it does concern me that maybe there was some kind of underlying issue there. As you mentioned, previously when you've seen these kind of injuries, it's been a checked kick or a checked or a block, etc. But to just put your arm down and see it break in that manner suggests there may have been an underlying issue there. So again, does that mean it could potentially be more time out? Was there something going on for a long period of time? And, maybe it's the build-up over the years. And this is where, again, we look at fighters being monitored. Can we do that better? Could we perhaps pick this up earlier for Pantoja? I had a very interesting conversation with a lady on Friday evening regarding some of the technology available now in terms of, monitoring athletes and so on. And it certainly in sports like NFL, it's amazing what is being done. But yeah, I think from Van's side of things, as you said, he earned his way there. He earned that opportunity and he stepped in there and did what he needed to do. And yes, he won the victory via an injury. But also, let's talk about what a great in the UFC, what a great weekend for Asian MMA. I mean, last week I asked you the question about has there been a little bit of a stall in terms of the development of Asian athletes in UFC, and here we are potentially with now a title fight in the flyweight division coming up next between two Asian athletes. Incredible, eh?
Fantastic. Tatsuro Taira has the opportunity now to become the best Japanese MMA fighter of all time. What an accolade that would be. He's 25 years old, so he's reaching his absolute prime. His personality makes him very marketable. The fact now that he's got a TKO, usually submits people, is a big plus for him as well to do it against a two-time former champion.
Exactly. That's a massive win on his resume.
He's got a catchphrase, which, that's always a selling point. The more he learns English, the more that's going to work in his favor as well. But if you look at the history of Japanese athletes in the UFC, you've got Kyoji Horiguchi, you've got Kid Yamamoto. There are a few others, but we've never seen a Japanese champion in the UFC. So Taira has a huge opportunity now to make a bit of history because he's young. So you think he'll be in and around there, and he's earned that shot. And I like the fact that he came on the mic and he called his shot. He said, give me that belt, give me the title shot. I like fighters who want to go out there and take it. In this game, nothing is given.
Well, if you're the UFC right now, I'd be booking that venue in Japan today, right? In terms of taking the UFC to Asia, and we talked about it last week, what an event you can put on now between two Asian athletes, Japanese versus Myanmar. What an opportunity. And for the UFC, they must be rubbing their hands together. Look, Pantoja and Moreno have held up that division effectively for a long time. And potentially is a little bit of the change of the guard, like we mentioned, could happen, even though I didn't believe it would. But these men have proved me wrong. And again, I'm very excited to see what the UFC can now do. And I would have thought Japan is the perfect location to put that event on.
When was the UFC last in Japan? It was ages ago, wasn't it?
Again, not off the top of my memory, but it feels like a long time ago. I feel like they tried to push into that region, but they didn't quite get the traction they wanted. It'll also be interesting to see, with one championship moving strongly into Japan, will there be any pushback from that side of things? I don't know. There's always politics involved in these issues.
So according to the AI overview, UFC Fight Night, Ovin St. Preux versus Yushin Okami, September 23rd, 2017. Kind
Wow.
of coming up on a decade ago. So it's
And cause,
about time the UFC went back to Japan.
and given the history of Japan in combat sports, in Ryzen and obviously back in there in Pride and so on, like, isn't that somewhat a travesty that the UFC have taken that long to go back again? But now is the time. I say I would be booking that venue today.
100%. And with Kyoji Horiguchi coming towards the end of his career now, on the back of a big victory, here's your co-main event right there. You look to pair him with somebody good, a big name. What would be a fun fight for Horiguchi? Guys, comment below. But he's got to be on there, surely. And then there are other fighters around the region that could make that card really interesting. And again, Petr Yan with his Tiger Muay Thai connections. There are a lot of fighters who are training out of Asia. Do you put Zhang Wei Li on there against Mackenzie Dern for the title, something like that? I'm not sure.
That's a very
They're
good
probably
point,
saving
mate.
that for Shanghai.
Yeah, but there's loads of good fights, as you mentioned. As we know, like Phuket and some places like that, it's an incredible hub for combat sports. There's so many athletes around the world in that region. So to put on a great UFC card there would be fantastic for the region.
Any words for Henry Cejudo in his retirement?
Well, he's a legend, isn't he? Because as I mentioned last week, to be Olympic champion, and I think he actually mentioned it's a bit of a build-up, and we obviously extensively talked about last week in terms of it's still a business, the UFC. Matchmaking is still a business. Whereas if you're going to be Olympic champion, there is no shortcuts. And to have that on your resume, I see it the same way in boxing. If you're an Alexander Usyk, right? Or an Anthony Joshua who won a gold medal or medal, silver medal, whatever it might be in the Olympics, if you have that on your record, it's just another level to your resume. And that's why he's Triple C ultimately. And he was one of the early double champions. And I think he will be remembered as one of the greats of all time in the UFC.
Likewise, Murab. What a run he had. I mean, that winning run between, 2018 and 2025, Sandhagen, O'Malley, Nurmagomedov, O'Malley, Cejudo, Yan, Aldo, Moraes, Starman, Dodson. Just a silly, silly run from the machine. That's got to go down in history as one of the all-time great runs in mixed martial arts. And one thing you'll say about Murab is that guy defended his belt. How active has he been in the last couple of years? The guy has had huge fight after huge fight, main event, 5-rounders. He has put his body on the line, and even the machine, it comes around in the end, in your 30s. It does come around. You have your day, and to see Petr Yan slam him on his head, quite a statement from the Russian.
That's the question, is it? Has the machine run out of fuel? Has he fought too much in the last 2 years? One of the biggest arguments for him being the best fighter of the year is the fact how active he's been. As you said, he's defended that belt without hesitation. But has he come to the end of that run? Now, will we see him bounce back? Do you think he'll get an immediate rematch? Do you see him winning that belt again?
I see him winning that belt again. If he's absolutely dead set on getting that belt back, and that's all he wants on planet Earth, and he dedicates himself to it, 100% you back a guy like Murab. He's got it in his locker. I think the best thing he could do right now is have a holiday. Take it easy. Maybe don't jump head first into any ice. Murab's always up to something mad, but recovery has got to be the first port of call for the moment. I would love to see the numbers. I'd love to see the data. Not that my small brain could make much of it, but you know what I mean. I would love to know. We talk about footballers who are in the red zone. I would be interested to know how fully this timing was correct for Murab to face a killer like Petr Yan. If all the numbers were suggesting now's the time to defend again, or in fact it was suggesting now's the time to rest, because there's only so much you can put your body through unless you're Kevin Holland. there is a time to put your feet up. And I know the impetus is on a champion, and the fans, the pressure will be there, the promoters, the pressure will be there, the sponsors. Everyone wants you to fight. But imagine if Murab had signed off after that run in Khabib-like fashion and just put his feet up. He would go down as an all-time great, if not the greatest bantamweight of all time.
I agree, and I said I was ready to come on this podcast today and put him in that kind of bracket as being one of the greatest of all times. But Petr Yan stepped up and produced an incredible performance, and I feel like the machine has run out of fuel. I think there will be a rematch or a trilogy, because it was a fantastic fight as well. We have to just mention that. Yes, Yan clearly won the fight, but it was a great fight. And I think there'll be a huge appetite to see that again at the end of the first quarter next year.
It's interesting as well because Murab looked infallible. And in this game, eventually everybody loses. It's just the nature of the sport, and that's what makes it so intriguing. We're kind of still waiting for John Jones to lose. He's the one, right? He's the only one, and he's very sensible. He knows that he's getting older, so he's being a bit discerning about his matchups now.
Well, I think the really interesting point there is that, yes, Murab has lost, and I agree with that. But he's lost to someone he's beaten beforehand, which makes this even more interesting. Perhaps Murab would not have taken that fight if it is against a new opponent. Perhaps he thought he had Jan's number. He'd faced this guy before and he knew how to beat him. And did he take it lightly? Maybe that's the question. Did he underestimate Yan? I think we underestimated Yan. And maybe that's part of the problem here. Maybe when we see that trilogy, that we'll see a different Murab.
The other thing is the whole silk pajamas thing. Now, I don't doubt the drive of Murab. I think he is more driven than maybe any fighter we've ever seen before. But, there's big championship tours of Georgia. There's guest appearances. There's all sorts that come into it, not only when you're the champion, but when you become a bit of a celebrity. Murab has very quickly become one of the most popular fighters in the UFC, and there's a lot that goes into that. And it's very difficult going from being, what was he, a laborer with a dream, and that was it, just that raw hunger to succeed, to being paid millions of dollars and being busy with a load of other engagements that come along with being a very famous UFC champion. These are factors that are sometimes intangible.
That is a very good point, Andrew. I agree with that completely. Whether or not that's the case, we don't know. But it is something historically, if you look at athletes who reach the pinnacle, now the greatest athletes of all time learn how to handle that pinnacle, because you are going to be inundated with a whole new level of, let's say, opportunities. And as you mentioned, even on social media, he's a very active guy, done a lot of stuff with Nina Drama, correct? As you mentioned, he's become somewhat of a celebrity in this space. Now, managing that balance now comes down to the team of people around you. And do you have a great manager who can manage that for you? There's always going to be, in your daily life as an elite athlete, you are going to have to manage your media. You have to manage your sponsors, your as I say, your obligations to your country. But how you structure that is often the defining point between, can you maintain that greatness or will it break you? As you mentioned, the silk pajamas analogy, that's a great point, because the greatest of all time learn how to handle that. And, I look at other sports and so on, and you see people rise to the top and then they fall off because they can't. Now, I don't know if I put Murab in that category. I think in this case, for me, if I were to give a hypothesis on what happened, I'd say he potentially underestimated Yan because he beat Yan last time and he thought he had his number. And let's be honest, Murab has been so comfortable in all his title defenses. And Yan just stepped up and produced an incredible performance and took him by surprise. But I do think that's a very real question to ask of athletes who get to the top and then have a sudden drop off. Are they managing their responsibilities as a champion as well as they could do? Or is it perhaps overawing them and they getting distracted?
Could one of the winners this weekend be Sean O'Malley, one of the biggest stars in the UFC 2-3 years ago? But I like how he's not shy of making fun of himself on his podcast. He said, I've fallen off badly. Look at me. I'm way down the card now. I was main eventing not so long ago. So he's got Song Yadong, which I think is a fantastic matchup for him. The worst matchup would be someone like Nurmagomedov for him, I think. A wrestler he needs a fellow striker. I think Song Yadong is not afraid to stand in front of O'Malley. I think it'll be a great matchup. But if O'Malley's able to get a big knockout there, and you know that he's able to cut a promo, this could be a huge advantage for O'Malley, because Yan is a much better matchup for Sean O'Malley than Murab ever was. This freshens up the division. It brings new possibilities. And we like that as fans, right? It opens the door.
I agree with you, mate. It's a great point. Like, it is really mixed up, that division. Because with Murab on top, and you felt like he was somewhat infallible, you were thinking, well, what is the next fight after he beats Phetjeeja? Who is next for him? But now with Yan winning, as you mentioned there, that O'Malley versus Yan fight's a great striking fight as well. But again, having watched Petr Yan today wrestle, maybe it's not quite as good a matchup for O'Malley it once was. But I agree. It was certainly for that division, it was a great change. And I'm excited to see it. I mean, both those divisions, flyweight and bantamweight, all of a sudden it's become a lot more exciting. I think the UFC, perhaps we didn't expect it, but has had a real good mix-up of late, where a lot of divisions now have become a lot more exciting than perhaps they were a few months ago.
Well, if you look back, remember it was the Yan fight that sent O'Malley to the stratosphere, because I believe he was ranked 10th and Yan was ranked 1st, and he was given the shot by virtue of being interesting. And he got the split decision, which shocked a lot of people, and me included. And that's what put him right at the top of the division. So things have kind of gone full circle, because Yan had to work him way back. Remember, there was the Aljo fights and the rivalry there, Murab's best mate. So lots of storylines bubbling along. Bantamweight could be the division to watch after we've spent so much time talking about welterweight this year. But wraps it up and gives us lots of storylines to think about with the last pay-per-view of the year. And we'll look ahead, of course, to UFC 324 in January. We'll be probably talking about that for the next couple of shows. In the meantime, there was a bit of drama at One Championship I enjoyed. I interviewed Ramadan Ondash, fighting out of Tiger Muay Thai, an absolute prodigy. He's been fighting since he was about 6-7 years old. There was viral videos of him. Wonderful technique, just as a little kid. He learned with his brothers in Lebanon. He's been a prodigy for Tiger Muay Thai for many years, managed by Johnny Betts. Wonderful Muay mat style, real power puncher. That left hook, they call him the Scorpion. Once he touches your chin, you are going down. On his debut for One Championship proper, after earning the contract, he gets Aliff Rakib, who's half Malaysian, half Thai, fighting out of Sor Dechapan. This is big news for Malaysia. Malaysia have only ever had one fighter fight for a title in One Championship history, which was Agalan Tani against UFC veteran Ben Askren. Unfortunately, Agalan got steamrolled in that fight. Malaysia's never come close to winning a title before in One Championship. Other than that, they've got Johan Ghazali, who is the handsome, great hope, hugely popular, great knockout power, but he's suffered some losses, and I think it will still be some time before we might see him fight for a title. He's still, by his own admission, got a lot to learn. Aliff is tall, rangy, and smart, Muay Fameur style. So this was a wonderful matchup between two young hotshots to see who would get a shot at Phetjeeja. I thought Ondash with his power would do it. But Aliff kept him at range and frustrated him. You could see how annoyed he was getting, trying to get on the inside. He kept catching the kick, but Aliff was able to strike him nonetheless. Aliff landed a flying knee, got the knockdown, and Ramadan was so frustrated, he was in tears, and Aliff got the decision, was giving it all this. The fans on the video I posted have got well over 100,000 views, just giving it to Ramadan, who missed weight, calling him a crybaby and all this, because the video of Ramadan was saying, give me Phetjeeja, so he was a little bit looking past Aliff. The bottom line being, this is massive, massive news if you're a Malaysian combat sports fan, because you have your guy fighting for a title against Phetjeeja, the Muay Thai strawweight belt in One Championship. Phetjeeja, one of the greatest to ever do it. He's had hundreds of fights. Aliff will go into that fight as the underdog. But this clash made you think, just for a moment, if Aliff is able to keep Phetjeeja at range and land one of those flying knees, anything can happen. And it could be monumental for the scene here in Malaysia, for young kids to see a guy like Aliff even get himself into title contention, but maybe win the title itself, it could be a game changer for the sport in Malaysia. So I'm going to be watching that one closely. Elsewhere, the Queen, Phetjeeja, returning to Muay Thai for the first time in almost 2 years. Just beat the brakes off Martina. A little bit too soon for Martina. Huge disparity in experience between the two fighters. But for the love of God, guys, make the super fight with Alicia Helen Rodriguez. We have been waiting. Phuket Fight Club against Venom. Phetjeeja versus Alicia. Two of the greatest of the modern era. It has all the makings of a classic. Even Phetjeeja told me that it could be the Rod Tang and Superlek for women's Muay Thai. So lots going on in one championship. Lots of fights to look forward to there as well.
A bit of a shock loss for Andrade, right? As well.
In the main event, of course, but a horrible matchup for him. Just a savage wrestler from Mongolia, the second Mongolian MMA champion in one championship history. It's a shame because when I spoke to Fabrizio, he said, a lot of people question my grappling. Those questions will be answered. And that was the headline I went with for my article, and it was kind of the opposite. And that's often the case, right? When you're a striker, he's a wonderful striker. I love to watch him, and beautiful body shots. He's got such a lovely highlight reel. Maybe a bit of inactivity counted against him through no fault of his own. I think it's been a year since we saw him, or last fought in January, maybe, Fabrizio. Really tough matchup. But again, the division has been shaken up. Fabrizio has been holding the belt for a while, so it'll be interesting to see where we go from here.
I agree. And as you mentioned last week, if you get a really high-level wrestler, it's always such a difficult matchup for anyone, isn't it? You know, wrestling ultimately is still it probably is the number one differentiator, correct? I mean, that's the statement you made last week, and I think this fight was a great example of that.
100%. Just lost you for a moment there, Chris. But before we go, I think I've got you back. I wanted to ask you about your plans for the end of the year, because you're off to Dubai, right? What's going on over there at the moment?
Yeah, I got a busy week this week coming up, mate. First of all, I've got a couple of interviews coming up on Tuesday. I'm going to speak with Tolly Plested, the head coach of the UAE MMA Federation. Tolly's had a really incredible career, both as an athlete and now into coaching. So it's going to be a very interesting one to speak to him on Tuesday, and also learn about what he's doing with the UAE MMA Federation. Obviously, I visited there earlier in the year, and we had a great time catching up then. And then secondly, I've got a really interesting interview doing with Dr. Michael Schwartz. Now, he is the co-chair of the ABC Medical Committee. And the ABC is, of course, the Association for Boxing Commissions. They are the people who implement the current medical protocols that sanction all the events in the United States. So your UFC, Matchroom, Top Rank, Golden Boy, and so on. So that's going to be really, and I encourage everyone to tune into him. This is a guy with incredible experience in the medical profession in combat sports. He started the AARP, the Association of Ringside Physicians. So a lot of what you experience now in terms of how athletes are looked after at the top level of combat sports, this man is responsible for. So again, I encourage everyone to tune into that interview. And then finally, later this week, yes, I'll be heading over to Dubai to attend the IBA World Boxing Championships, which again, we mentioned briefly last week, is against this backdrop. There's kind of ongoing, say, power struggle for amateur boxing between the IBA and the World Boxing. But regardless, there's going to be a great event, attending the pro fight night on Friday night, and then the amateur finals on the Saturday night. We're going to go to Brain Dubai, of course, catch up with the team there, working on our next development of our partnerships and how we can support elite athletes and also develop, improved protocols for baseline testing, both pre and post fight. So, yeah, an exciting week ahead, mate, and looking forward to keeping you up to date on it all.
Awesome. Big end to the year. I'm off to Bangkok on Monday for the rehearsals for the SEA Games. I'll be commentating the opening ceremony. So lots to catch up on episode 9. In the meantime, guys, if you enjoyed it, please like, share, subscribe, all those things, and comment below if you've got any questions about anything we discussed today. Exciting times for M2 MMA and a big end to the year for combat sports on the whole. We'll see you next week.
Cheers, mate.